She stood at the altar in a lace dress that had been pristine only 2 hours before the world shattered. The groom's letter arrived, carried by a smirking cousin, his words a blade that left her gasping and stumbling. She fled the chapel into a sudden downpour, dragging her train through gutters, mud swallowing every hope. By dusk, she was miles from town, her white satin now a tattered brown-streaked ruin clinging to trembling legs. The abandoned church road ended at a weathered ranch gate where a lone Wrangler watched with steady eyes. He didn't ask her name or why she wept. He only gestured toward the stable with a scarred hand. Inside, the lantern light revealed a stallion so black it seemed to swallow the shadows whole, utterly magnificent. The Wrangler spoke low. "This is Eclipse, a beast no man has ever ridden without being thrown hard." She lifted her muddy hand toward the stallion's velvet muzzle, and the great horse exhaled a shuddering sigh. Eclipse pressed his forehead against her palm, and something in her chest that had frozen began to crack. The Wrangler, named Cade, said quietly, "He's never done that, not for anyone, not even me." Without a word, Cade saddled the stallion with a richly tooled leather seat and silver-studded bridle. He then lifted her effortlessly onto Eclipse's back, her ruined dress spilling like a defeated banner across the flanks. "He's yours to ride," Cade murmured. "You need a throne more than I need a prize." She gripped the reins with fingers still stained from the ditch, and the stallion danced beneath her lightly. Cade opened the corral gate and pointed toward the infinite prairie where the last sunlight was bleeding gold. She squeezed her heels, and Eclipse surged forward, a living thunderbolt carrying her away from every broken vow. The muddy rags streamed behind her like a war flag, and the wind scoured her face clean of tears. For the first time since the letter, she breathed deeply, and the breath tasted of sage and freedom. Cade mounted his bay gelding and followed at a distance, close enough to protect, but far enough to honor. They galloped across rolling grasslands where wild mustangs raised their heads to watch the woman on the legendary horse. Eclipse moved as if he knew her soul, each stride a reclamation of the dignity the chapel had stolen. She remembered the cruel words from the letter, "You're not enough to carry my name, not ever." But now the stallion carried her, and his power became her own, pulsing through every vein like lightning. She crested a red rock ridge and halted. The entire valley spread beneath the sky, turning violet and fierce. Cade rode up beside her and pointed to a distant cluster of lights that marked the town's evening glow. "If you ride back now," he said, "they won't see a jilted bride, they'll see a queen." She turned to him, her eyes still raw but burning with a new light, and she straightened her spine. Her wedding dress, now dried into stiff waves of earth, felt not like shame, but like ceremonial armor. They walked the horses down the ridge, and she began to braid her wild, tangled hair with prairie grass. Cade offered her his own leather hat to shield her face, and she settled it on her head calmly. The stallion nickered softly, and she leaned forward to whisper, "Thank you for seeing what I truly am." The town square was lit with lanterns and the lingering murmur of the wedding guests who had witnessed her disgrace. As she rode Eclipse between the buildings, people stopped, their mouths falling open at the breathtaking spectacle. Her muddy gown caught the firelight like dark gold, and the black stallion arched his neck with regal pride. She didn't dismount, didn't speak, just walked the horse to the chapel steps where the groom stood frozen. His new, hastily chosen bride clung to his arm, but no one looked at her, only at the sovereign. The stallion pawed the ground, a single sharp strike that echoed like a gavel asserting her absolute triumph. She gazed down at the man who had discarded her and smiled with a serenity that required no words. Cade watched from the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable, but his chest swelling with quiet satisfaction. The town's matriarch, old Mrs. Whitfield, removed her own heirloom brooch and pinned it to the girl's shoulder. "You are more than any name," the old woman declared. "You are the one the wild chose tonight." The bride they had pitied was gone, replaced by a woman who had made the wilderness her cathedral. She turned Eclipse and rode slowly toward Cade, the crowd parting like water before a sacred procession. "Thank you for the stallion," she said, "but I have nothing to repay such a gift." Cade shook his head and replied, "You repaid it the moment you sat tall and let him run." They rode back to his ranch under a canopy of stars, the stallion stepping in perfect rhythm with her heart. She slept in the bunkhouse that night, the wedding dress folded on a chair, no longer a garment of sorrow. At dawn, she rose and scrubbed the dress in the creek until the water ran clear and the lace showed. She hung it on a line, and it danced in the morning breeze like a white flag of truce with herself. Cade handed her a cup of coffee and said, "The horse is yours to keep, if you'll stay." She looked at Eclipse grazing beside the barn, his coat shimmering with health, and tears welled anew. "Why would you give away your best stallion to a stranger in muddy rags?" she asked him. He sat on a feed barrow, his eyes distant for a moment, and spoke of a sister he'd failed. His sister had been left at a church too, and she'd never found a horse to carry her back. He'd sworn that if ever a woman showed the same pain, he'd hand over his finest ride. The story settled into her like a seed, and she vowed to honor both his loss and her own. For a week she worked beside him, mending fences, feeding stock, and learning the language of quiet labor. Eclipse followed her everywhere without a rope, his muzzle resting on her shoulder whenever she paused to rest. Her hands grew calloused, her skin bronzed under the sun, and the wedding dress stayed clean on the line. One afternoon, a wealthy rancher from the next county arrived, offering a fortune to buy the untamable stallion. Cade refused bluntly, but the man sneered at the woman and said, "A stray bride can't possibly ride him." She walked calmly to the pasture and whistled a low note that only Eclipse knew and trusted completely. The stallion thundered toward her, sliding to a halt so close the dust painted her bare feet like powder. She vaulted onto his back without bridle or saddle, gripping only his mane, and they cantered a perfect circle. The wealthy rancher's jaw dropped as she executed a flawless sliding stop, her posture regal and unshakable. "This horse chose me," she declared, "and a choice like that can't be bought with paper." The man left, and Cade laughed, a rare, full sound that seemed to crack the drought of his grief. That evening, she finally asked his permission to ride alone to the ridge where they'd first watched sunset. He agreed, and she rode Eclipse bareback, the wedding dress left behind, wearing only a simple cotton shift. On the ridge, she dismounted and shouted her own name to the wind, reclaiming every syllable that had been mocked. The stallion whinnied, and the echo came back as if the whole world was now learning her true identity. She realized she no longer needed a husband's validation. The land itself had adopted her as its daughter. Back at the ranch, Cade had built a new hitching post with a brass plate engraved with her initials. She touched the cool metal and said, "You're giving me a place here, not just a horse." He nodded, and for the first time, she saw the loneliness in him, a reflection of her own. They began to train Eclipse together for the upcoming territorial races, blending her intuition with his seasoned skill. The stallion responded to her whispered commands, leaping over fallen logs with the grace of a shadow. Word of the mud bride and the black stallion spread across the territory like a prairie fire of inspiration. Other jilted women wrote her letters, and she answered each one with a pressed sage leaf and a promise. She told them, "Find the horse that sees your soul, and you will never walk in shame again." At the big race, she entered as the only woman, her outfit a simple split skirt and Cade's hat. The crowd expected a spectacle of failure, but Eclipse exploded from the starting line like a released comet. They won by 10 lengths, and as she crossed the finish, she wept with the sheer weight of deliverance. The silver trophy was presented, and she dedicated it to all those who had been told they were insufficient. Cade lifted her off the horse, and for a moment, his hands lingered on her waist, steady and warm. She finally asked, "Why did you never try to tame him yourself, Cade, if he's so valuable?" He replied, "Because a creature that fierce can't be tamed, only partnered, and I was waiting for you." That night, under a canopy of stars, he kissed her forehead with a tenderness that promised everything and demanded nothing. She leaned into him, feeling that the broken pieces of both their pasts were being forged into something new. Eclipse stood sentinel nearby, a dark guardian whose loyalty had stitched two solitary souls into a family. She began teaching young girls at the ranch how to ride, using Eclipse as a gentle ambassador of confidence. Her wedding dress, now permanently clean, was framed in the barn not as a relic but as a lesson. It read, "Even the most ruined garment can become a banner when carried by someone who knows her worth." Cade sold his lesser stock to build a riding school, and she named it Eclipse Academy for Reclaimed Grace. On the academy's opening day, a carriage arrived carrying the very groom who had jilted her, now destitute. He begged forgiveness, claiming his new wife had left him and he needed shelter and a second chance. She stood in the doorway, Eclipse's halter in one hand, and felt not anger but a profound release. "I can give you a meal and a bed for one night," she said, "but my kingdom requires no king." He wept, but she was unmoved, for the stallion had taught her that true sovereignty cannot be begged. Cade watched from the corral, his eyes full of pride, and he polished the engraved hitching post until it gleamed. That winter, Cade knelt in the snow and offered her a ring forged from an old horseshoe nail. She accepted with a laugh that echoed across the white-blanketed prairie, and Eclipse nickered as if blessing them. Their wedding was held in the barn, and she wore her mother's lace veil over a simple blue dress. The old muddy wedding gown hung in its frame, lit by a single lantern, a testament to rebirth. As they exchanged vows, Eclipse pushed open the stall door and stood beside them, a self-appointed witness. The town came to celebrate, and Mrs. Whitfield declared, "This ranch is the heart of the territory now." She kissed Cade with a passion that had nothing to do with desperation and everything to do with freedom. Later, she rode Eclipse to the ridge, now in a dress of deep green, and watched the sunset alone. She spoke aloud, "I was a victim, but today I am a wife, a teacher, and a queen." The stallion snorted, and she rested her cheek against his warm neck, feeling the steady pulse of wild grace. Cade joined her, and they stood together, their shadows merging with the horse's silhouette against the dying light. The academy flourished, turning out riders who carried themselves with the dignity the stallion had first given her. Each year she led a parade through town on Eclipse, her muddy rags now a legend written in leather. The jilted bride was never mentioned again, only the woman who rode the untamable and became its master. Her children, born later, would learn to ride on Eclipse's gentle back, his black coat flecked with gray. Cade passed first, leaving her the ranch and the stallion who had grown old beside them both. When Eclipse finally lay down for the last time, she held his great head and sang the prairie song. She buried him on the ridge under a stone that read, "Here rests the heart of a queen's kingdom." Her own hands, now wrinkled, still bore the strength the stallion had lent her on that first gallop. In her final years, she wrote a memoir titled Muddy Rags to Royalty, and every copy carried a wildflower. She passed in her sleep, a faint smile on her lips, her hand resting on Cade's old leather hat. The ranch became a sanctuary for broken souls, both human and horse, guided by her daughter, who inherited Eclipse's spirit. And the wedding dress still hangs in the barn, its mud stains bleached by time into golden sacred threads.